Okay, anyway. So let me begin by thanking Sriram, Robert, Subodh, and Jerome, right, for the invitation to the meeting. I wanted to go one step back, and I don't seem to be okay. Yeah, so this was the title of my talk, Future of CMB, B-Modes, and CMB Bharat. It's really not possible to do all three in half an hour. So I decided to not talk about much about the future of CMB. I will just briefly mention CMB B modes. Largely, the talk would focus on the CMB Bharat mission, but it's sort of essentially capturing the eventual goals of the CMB community if we had the resources and the support that we needed. And I think that is the spirit in which this should be taken. So I wanted to mention that there is now an Indian cosmology consortium called CMB Bharat for 2 years now, and we are the ones who proposed the mission, and so I'll tell you more about it as we go along. Okay, so just for to set the stage, as an observer, when you look out into the universe, if you go 14 gigaparsecs away, which is like 42 billion light years, you would hit a plasma screen, which is shown in red around you. This is around any observer in the universe. Back in time, this shows you the universe as it was when it was 500,000 years old. And we knew about this plasma screen since 1965. That was the cosmic micro background, which, whereas the screen is at 3,300 Kelvin, by the time the light gets here, due to the expansion of the universe, we see a 3 Kelvin bath from this, which is the cosmic microwave background. And the cosmic microwave background has a perfect black body spectrum to the limits that we have been able to probe it. And that points to the hot and dense origin of the universe. So that's why we believe that the universe had an early hot and dense phase. And the hot Big Bang, by extension, is our background model. And since 1992, we have started discovering the uh, little signals that are there on the screen. So we've been able to read off temperature and isotropies in different directions. The temperature is slightly different by tens of millikelvin. And also, there's a nice linear polarization pattern, all due to physics that is well understood, and I will just probably only allude to it briefly. And this leads to the question of what gave rise to this fluctuation in the first case. And this underlies the quest that we have in cosmology at this time. We do want to understand the processes that govern the absolutely at the beginning of the universe. With lab physics, we are able to go far back in time, almost to some 20 orders of magnitude below the second scale, from what we think is the beginning. But if we were to see a few signals, we would have more clarity on the kind of processes that may have been operating in the early universe. And that is a quest, because these tiny perturbations, and we believe in a large class of our understanding of these early universe, that this could be something where the fluctuations have quantum origin. And we have an amazing possibility that quantum fluctuations gave rise to all the structure that we see around us, some of which you saw on Alexander's slides. This beautiful large-scale structure that Alexander mentioned is highly informative, and people are trying to glean as much information about the universe from this large-scale structure, as well as from the cosmic microwave background. So let me go forward in what you understood from the previous talk. You notice that we have converged around what is a concordance cosmological model. And you can begin to call it something like a standard cosmological model, though I put standard within quotes. It's not like the standard model of particle physics. It's, you have to understand it a bit more, carefully to make such claims. But we believe that a model that fits all data that we have till now is a spatially flat universe that's expanding, um, and it is dominated at this time by a cosmological constant that accounts for about 70% of the energy density of the universe. The rest of it is made of cold dark matter, and a tiny fraction, uh, about 5%, is made of um, the baryons, the stuff that we are aware of. So it's quite an exotic universe that we can infer from the data. Okay, and the question is, what do we want to do further? As Alexander pointed out, our probes of cosmology are improving every day, and we are, at least apart from a few puzzles here and there, kind of converging very nicely onto a model very similar to this. It has to be something or its very close cousin. But there's one signature that cosmology seeks in understanding the early universe. So we believe that the early universe uh, had hosted a very interesting phase of very rapid expansion of the universe from, where by a factor of 28 powers of 10 in size over a very short time, 10 to the minus 35 seconds. And if you have such rapid accelerated expansion, then besides solving some of the cosmological conundrums were there, it generates for you naturally the density perturbations that could lead to the large scale structure of galaxies and clusters and superclusters that we see in our universe. And it also um, explains for you the seed perturbations kind of imprinted on the last scattering surface, that plasma screen that I said gives to our cosmic microwave background. Now, if we believe that the scalar perturbations or the density perturbations did arise from inflation, uh, all theories of inflation tells you that it would be accompanied by a generation of gravitational waves. Okay, it's this identical mechanism underlying both. Only the issue is, depending on a model, the ratio of the gravitational wave perturbation amplitude and the density perturbation amplitude, which we denote by a, quantity called R, which actually relates very neatly to the energy scale of this high energy process. It's a scale to the power of 1/4, and that is something that we don't know. But we do believe that for most models, there should be some signal of this primordial gravitational waves from inflation. And that, to me, I mean, I belong to the personally to the camp which believes that that is something that's absolutely a must do and a to do for cosmology. And we should really look for it. If we don't find it up to a point, then maybe you start worrying about some alternative. But till now, most of the story holds together very nicely. All the stories about large scale structure and whatever you derive depends on these primordial fluctuations, and we do need to understand the origin of it. And we have a good guess, and we must exhaust all possibilities in checking it out. So CMB has been a particularly very impressive field in terms of the developments there. So I started my PhD at the time when COBE announced its first results in 1992. And so then that decade belonged to COBE, the next decade belongs to WMAP, and the final decade, now the previous decade, third decade, belongs to Planck. These are three generational space satellites which actually mapped out the CMB fluctuations in finer and finer resolution, and also started gleaning the linear polarization information out. But one should remember that while these three are the milestone missions, there have been many, oops, I don't have them here, but many ground-based observations all through these 3 decades, led by very brave teams, which have got fantastic results all through. In fact, the first discovery of linear polarization was ground-based from an instrument called DAISY, DASI, not DSY, as you heard earlier. And this progress is relentless. So you see here a plot of the approximate raw experimental sensitivity that WMAP had, which dominated the first decade of the millennium. Then Planck had here in red, which is the second decade of the millennium. You can see that there are sensitivity curves of detectors from the ground, which are slowly going past these Planck and giving you possibilities far beyond. So this stage 3 is where we are now, and stage 4 is soon to begin. Of course, this timeline is not really as accurate, but this is probably the little bit that I can talk about the future of CMB, in the sense that we will be attacking this from the ground, with major surveys underway in Atacama, and as well as in Antarctica, and possibly someday in Tibet, or the Indian side of it. We'll see. But what are we looking for? Why are we doing this relentless improvement in sensitivity? That's because we want to get to a particular signal of linear polarization. So linear polarization is, as you know, just a stick on the sky. I mean, when I look at a direction, if there's a linearly polarized light, the intensity will maximum at a particular angle. So I draw a stick with that angle on the sky. And if I do that, then I have a nice pattern of sticks on the sky, in addition to the temperature fluctuation as an additional information. And density waves gives rise to radial and tangential patterns of this stick. But what's amazing is gravitational waves gives you a completely different kind of possibility. They give you that radial and tangential pattern, but they also give you handed patterns. So the pattern like this cartwheel here, left or right cartwheels, and these are the B modes of polarization, which would be a telltale signature of gravitational waves of the early universe. Now, there are details here of where you will look for them, and I will talk about them as we go along a little bit. So let me ask the question, if we are doing so well and we are also have very high promises from the ground, why would one look for a next generation space mission beyond Planck? Now, first answer is, that's something that has been always on the cards. So at least when I began as a faculty member in 2000, the idea was you'll have WMAP finish, Planck, and then there will be something called CMB Pol. All right, and it's been a bit of a shock actually that we don't have a next generation satellite yet, because CMB measurements have been transformational for cosmology. The Planck mission extracted 100% of the temperature fluctuation information that is there in the CMB sky, but it has only extracted 10% of the polarization information, these pattern of stakes. We have measured them quite well. So if you look at the plots, it will look like, oh, what else do you have to do? But we are not what is called cosmic variance limited in CMB polarization. We are far from that. And there is a lot of information. And particularly the B modes gives a very high promise on that. And I should also add that I told you that if I look at the energy spectrum of the cosmic microwave background, it is consistent with the black body to the extent we have checked. But this was last checked in 1992 with little bits done here and there. I mean, there have been missions like Arcade and others, but largely not a very significant push in this direction. So that's another window open, where you can extract information for the cosmic microwave background. So what will it give us? So it will give us, if we just focus on this polarization information, there's a very ultra high lofty goal of revealing primordial gravitational waves from inflation. And that would be actually very exciting. Although we have seen gravitational waves directly in LIGO, these will be gravitational waves of quantum origin. And this would be a clear signature of quantum field theory in curved space-time in action, right? And it would also kind of shed light on the ultra high energy physics in the early universe. Besides this lofty goal, which, as I said, depending on the value of R, may or may not be achieved, but there are goals that are almost guaranteed. So we would have a lot of neutrino physics coming out of it. We will also map all the dark matter, most of the baryons. So in terms of the numbers, the figure of merit numbers that Alex showed about the various Planck plus S4 kind of numbers, you see here that figure of merit for all that you want kind of a CMB space mission would be 10 million. So it would kind of improve the constraints on the cosmological model by a factor of 10 million in the six-dimensional, seven-dimensional parameter space. The rich galactic and extragalactic astrophysics that is obviously obtained, which was very evident in Planck. Half the papers were talking about not the cosmic microwave background as a cosmological thing, but more the galactic and extragalactic astrophysics that needed to be that could be gleaned out of it. Okay, with CMB as the backlight. And of course, there is kind of unexpected discovery space here. And in particular, if we look at the spectral information more deeply, then we have a unique probe of the thermal history of the universe, and that may throw surprises. So it's worth digging in on that side. So, I mean, we are not the ones. I mean, people have been, as I said, I was brought up with the idea that there will be a next generation satellite beyond Planck. So there have been many, many proposals which have not really gone to, I mean, gone at different stages, have not really fructified yet. So there was, few of them are listed here. So these are ESA, NASA proposals of various kinds. I will only separate them in things that focused on the B modes alone, which was CORE, Cosmic Origins Explorer, PICO from NASA, I think primordial inflation in cosmology observer or something like that. I don't remember the name. And as I said, ECO was the proposal that we made to ISRO. Okay. At this point, the space mission that is ongoing on the track is Lightbird from JAXA, which is a Japanese-led proposal with multiple partners. And as of January 30th, this is something that I picked up from their website. It has been selected as one of the 31 highest priority large projects by Science Council of Japan, right? So this seems to be doing well. And so this is where we will probably be the first step in space missions after Planck. So let me explain, do a very brief tour of the Lightbird experiment. So it is going to go on a JAXA H3, and this typically gives you the size of the thing. There are two telescopes on it because they have a half-wave modulator which is rotating there in front of that, and there are two kind of that doesn't work over all frequencies, so you have to separate it out to two telescopes. And the idea of Lightbird was to design a satellite optimized for the B modes. So they're only going for the B modes, not the other things that will come, because they believe that those will come from ground-based observations. And it was supposed to be lightweight, compact satellite, and would require would not require very high angular resolution. So this would kind of make the mirrors small. Um, they have only 30 centimeter mirrors. And these are the specifications of the lifetime of the mission and other details. I also wanted to point out that over time, it started off with a JAXA mission where now ESA and NASA are already playing, and CSA, Canadian Space Agency, are already playing some role significant. And this is an evolving scenario out here. I don't have a date for their launch. I didn't want to guess on it, but if someone in the audience knows about it, you may please let us know. So this is from a slide that their PI, Masashi Hazumi, gave in September of this year. Oh, it can't be September 2020. It must be September 2019. I don't know. The date is probably off. But this is what Lightbird promises. So for scalar to tensor to scalar ratio of 0.01, Lightbird should be able to measure the gravitational wave signal quite comfortably. And to do that, it has about these many frequencies, I think 16 of them, ranging from 40 gigahertz to 400 gigahertz, which have different noise levels. And the beam size, notice, is on the degree scale for all of them, because that was by design, only looking at multipoles up to 100 to 100 and maybe 200, maybe little beyond 200 multipole. Okay. Um, so let me go next to talk about the Indian response to this. So the context of the Indian response was essentially based on the European community's proposal, the Cosmic Origins Explorer. They did not pass the initial programmatic screening in 2017, although it had a high science rating, but its cost did not fit an M-class envelope, and they were suggested to seek international partners. So in June, we started discussing this, and we brought ISRO, made ISRO aware of the possibility that India could join such a core proposal and make it happen. And that, of course, did not happen in enough fast enough. So it sort of, but led to an initiation of an Indian effort to get into frontier CMB kind of mission with by participating or even leading uh, um, full-blown mission for CMB. So this is we had a meeting where this consortium was set up, and we made a proposal to ISRO in April 2018, and we have made presentations. We have been shortlisted to the top committee, but we are still awaiting a final word on where we go from here. So ECO, as we called it, this is Exploring Cosmic History and Origins, is a near ultimate. So this is the dream kind of CMB satellite you would want for polarization. We also envisaged a small uh, additional instrument with spectral capability, but that was an optional addition. And depending on how the field is by the time this is evaluated, I think the relative weightages of the two parts will go. And we had this idea of observatory mode for 2 years after 4 years of survey. Okay, so as I said, there would be new science, extension in improvisation to the previous findings, and supplementary complementary science of rich nature. So let me go over that. And of course, you should always keep in the back of your mind the huge discovery space. So the proposal envisages the international collaboration explicitly, and at the start, and we projected the full costs, uh, you know, absolutely to make sure that there were no, no one had a misconception about it being cheap. Okay. So you see, if you have CMB Bharat, it sort of would improve over the proposal from Lightbird because it will go to higher resolutions and also will have significantly lower sensitivity, better sensitivity. But, of course, that comes at a cost and has to happen. Um, but this is again also the Lightbird curve is something that was there in 2018. So if it's improved or changed, my apologies to Lightbird. But these are the kind of promises. So we should be able to get at very tiny values of R. So here I think the R was 0.001, and you can see that the scalar to tensor ratio versus NS plot, something like this mission would be able to get it quite confidently. We would actually also, so these are more detailed curves, and I'm not going to spend time on that, which essentially tells you that we are sensitive to R of the order of 10 to minus 3 with this mission. So then we would of course look at the spectral shape of the primordial spectrum and the lensing amplitude, neutrino masses, as I told you, and the epoch of reionization, the width of the reionization. One of the areas where we'll have dramatic improvement is in the weak lensing of microwave background, which is something similar to the weak lensing that Alex talked about. And that had to do with weak lensing of galaxies by galaxies. But if you look at the weak lensing of CMB with galaxies, that is some signal that Planck measured for the first time and derived a map of the integrated mass distribution around us. This is at a coarse resolution and at a signal to noise of order unity. There's a huge room for improvement in this if you have very good measurements of the CMB polarization, including that at high resolution. And this is the expectations that we have. So you see the current level is somewhere around here. Actually, we have barely managed to detect the signal. I think the current level curve is off there by mistake. And then, depending on the neutrino masses, we would be able to get at them from this signal because we would be able to measure this lensing signal at this much better sensitivity shown by the red curve. We would also do a lot of astrophysics, cosmic infrared background, the mapping of cold molecular clouds, the dust in the galaxy, and the galactic magnetic field. We would also pick out many, many clusters, Sunyaev-Zelldowicz clusters, about 50,000 of them, up to a redshift of 2.5. And this is another kind of cosmology that you can do, which I don't think has been discussed in this meeting, but this is with clusters, and also with thermal distortion. You can, if you look at the spectrum of the CMB, you can get the global Sunyaev-Zelldowicz decaying dark matter, axions, and primordial black hole signals. So this is what the eco machine CMB Bharat proposed machine looks like. It has three mirrors, but schematically there is a mirror where we focus onto a detector plane, which is held at point 1 Kelvin, right? And basically, this is all happening in the same instrument, where this instrument on the back side is heated to 300 Kelvin. Okay, and this is a kind of a cartoon of the spacecraft. As I said, it's basically all that you want. So it goes from 62,000. Now we are even exploring going down to 40 gigahertz or 30 gigahertz to terahertz. And then multi-frequency, so 25 channels, spectral science, which will be possible even with that. unprecedented sensitivity and angular resolution to use the best detectors in the largest numbers you can. So these, I won't spend time on these, but it was basically a 2-ton um, wet mass satellite to be launched to the second Lagrange point. And we had two designs for the detectors. These are ones where there are 2,400 detectors, and this extends the frequency coverage envisaged by code to higher frequencies to get some more interesting science out of it, 700 to a terahertz. And then you could have basically a ground experiment kind of focal plane launched there. And this would have 6,800 detectors per polarization and would have a sensitivity of 1 microkelvin arc minute. The earlier one had 2 microkelvin arc minute. These are possible designs that we looked at. And as I said, we did check out that it can be launched by India using its best launching capability, which is the GSLV Mark III, and towards a Sun-Earth orbit. So we had exploratory meetings, and we've been talking about this. There were two dedicated meetings to this in early part of 2019. In 2019, there were other things. There was an inter-center team set up by ISRO to look at the benefits that ISRO would have by getting into such a project. And then there are departments being set up at various technology institutes in response to the kind of astronomy projects that are being proposed by the community here. And the main part that we have been involved in CMB Bharat is to identify teams in the academic sector, which can take part in such a mission. ISRO has its own capability, but they do not want to do a science experiment largely based on ISRO expertise. So that's the next goal. And as I said, it's a multifaceted science that you can do with a next generation CMB satellite, which is cosmological parameters, weak lensing, get a lot of foreground science of the galaxy and the cosmic infrared background. Of course, inflation is the target. You can do the kind of non-Gaussianity searches, spectral distortions, and then cluster science and cluster based cosmology. And then there were various working groups set up with people from this collaboration leading it. Some of them yet to come back as faculty to India. Some have come. I have not. Um, so Dheeraj has come back, for example. Subodh is looking to come back. Tuhin Ghosh is at NICER, and he's been carrying out with a group of people a lot of work on realistic dust simulations that would help us kind of get an idea of the foreground removal challenge involved for the next generation satellite. There's also a comprehensive project that is being done by these people here, uh, led by Devabrata Adak, who's the student at Ayuka, student of mine, and Tuhin, and then Jax, Sumin Bashak, and his student. And this looks at the possibility of using the existing component separation methods on realistic foreground dust simulations to get to a target of r of 10 to a minus 3. And as you see here, this compares the CMB Bharat possibilities with the noise curves of the various possibilities. One is Lightbird, the other one is Core, the other things are two versions of CMB Bharat. And if you extend to high frequencies, as I already indicated, and the other option of extending a little bit also on the low frequency end, these are the kind of constraints that you can place on R for R as small as 10 to the minus 3 or 5 into 10 to the minus 3 or 10 to the minus 2. And these are very realistic in terms of using the best idea we have about foregrounds. And this will be soon out as a paper. This is one version of the foregrounds. There are more complicated models of the foregrounds also looked at with corresponding curves. Okay. Then there is interesting work on how we can use the multi-frequency information that we have, even if we did not target a spectroscopic instrument there, to get spectral information. And this is work that Souradeep did with Joselk and Ben Walden. And this is something that we hope would be important for determining the science that we do with such things. Then there are very exciting things you can get from the spectral distortions, which is an area that Rishi Khatri at TIFA Mumbai leads. And, so I'll just point to the kind of expertise available in India already working on this. And then there are, these things can be used to constrain, action like particles, and which of course CMB-S4 would do that, but also, CMB-Bharat would do that very well. And then there are, more comprehensive pipelines being written to make sure that the data analysis for the next generation is done comprehensively. I'm sure I've gone over time, maybe, I don't know. So CMB Bharat, as I said, is alive but not really kicking. So it needs a trigger. The main thing that ISRO seeks is a higher share of responsibilities for the payload to be taken up by academic institutions. Okay, and that is our biggest challenge that we are kind of trying to address this time. And as you saw, that the community is steadily building up a more coordinated, focused research effort. And it's a harsh gestation period, but maybe given the high aspirations of ISRO, we would be able to take it to some conclusion. So the final two slides, I mean, here is ISRO's aspirations. It launched on GSLV, the mission to moon. And here we hope that the next mission after Planck, or maybe after Lightbird, would be CMB Bharat's mission on one of the Indian launches. Thank you very much. I'm sorry if I went over time, Prabha.
No, it's okay. You went just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
So thank you very much for a very nice summary and giving us the latest information on CMB Bharat. So I think we can now open for questions.
Yeah, so Prabha, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So can I ask a question right now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, great. So Alexander, first of all, thanks for a nice talk. I have a very naive question. So when you cross-correlate different probes, by how much order do you expect the results for primordial physics to improve? Can you please give me some idea, like, or will be at precision level?
Yeah. So that's a good question. So I don't know if I can share my screen again. Maybe.
Not yet. Yeah.
Can you see this? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is a slide I show, but of course I was very busy and I went fast. But I think as a measure of the improvement on the early universe parameters, we can look at NS. So you can look at the NS parameter. This is in this forecast study we did. This is that's not data. This is a forecast.
Yeah, of course, I understood. Yeah.
Yep. And what the one to look at is the difference between the red and the brown. So I know it's maybe hard to see the colors. Sorry, the difference between the blue and the brown. Sorry. So the blue would be what happens if you don't take the cross correlation into account. Here we're considering CMB lensing, galaxy clustering, galaxy weak lensing, and the CMB ISW effect only. Okay. And some nuisance parameters for calibration of the different probes. And you see the difference between the blue and the brown, as I say, on the upper right hand triangle. And you see you get a factor of 3 or something in these conditions for the improvements on NS, let's say, something of that order. Now, of course, this is idealized conditions where it's full sky, We have some systematics, but not all. It's cosmic variance limited. We don't have noise limited. We don't have noise in there. On the other hand, it's also pessimistic because we don't have tomography. So it's an indication. We're working on a more, realistic forecast as well. It was sitting the data. But I think that's quite a potential gain. In fact, what we find, which is very interesting, is that the larger the parameter space, the more we gain with the cross correlation. So if you have a very small parameter space, the auto correlation in some sense have all the information available on that model. But if you broaden the model by adding, modified gravity or more advanced, early universe parameters and so on, then the cross gives you a lot of additional information. In addition, of course, it allows you to check systematics. And so it also allows you to get the promised constraints you would get with the autos as well alone. So some of the information goes into constraining systematics as well. So I think personally, it's extremely promising to do this. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yes. So that's a very interesting question. So how much of the non-Gaussian information can be captured by the machine learning, right? And that's actually a difficult question because we don't know. We know how much non-Gaussian information we can get if we consider different statistics like the 3-point function or the peak statistic and so on. But we don't know what is the ultimate information available because we don't know how to capture, even in principle, all the non-Gaussian information with noise and all the realistic effects. So we don't know what is the floor of information available in a map when it's non-Gaussian. If it's Gaussian, then we know because we know the power spectrum contains all the information. But when it's not Gaussian, then we don't know. So we've done a lot of studies. We're in the process of comparing in details in realistic conditions the performance of the machine learning with more traditional non-Gaussian statistics. We've also looked at some cases where, very simplified cases where we know the floor. So we looked at, for example, a Gaussian case, and we use machine learning and the power spectrum. So the power spectrum, we use the ultimate constraint we can get. And we also did machine learning, and the machine learning gets all of the information out. So basically it does as well as the 2-point function if that's the only information available without being told it. So it's quite promising actually. And there's also a lot of work in more like on the computer science, theoretical computer science, to see how much of these networks can capture. So that's still an ongoing question, whether it can beat man-made, human-made statistics and so on. That's an open question. Very good question. Yep.
Hi, Prabha. Hi, this is Rajiv. I was the one who asked this question.
Oh, you're right.
But hi, Alex. Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Please go ahead.
Very quick. That is it possible that the algorithm that you are implementing for the machine learning is throwing out this non-Gaussian imprint in the constraints?
Well, I don't think it cannot. Well, we know that it does better. If you look at this plot, we know it does better than the 2-point function. Okay, if you match the scales available and so on. So it does better than the 2-point function. So it must get some non-Gaussian information out. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to get better constraint than the 2-point function. But it may not get all of it. It may not get all of the non-Gaussian information available. Yeah. So that's, and interestingly also, there are many possible architectures, as you may know, of these convolution deep learning networks. We've tried many, and it's relatively stable to them as long as it has, roughly speaking, as long as it have the right level of complexity. It looks like we get similar constraints. But maybe there's even more clever architecture that could do even better, right? Or more training and so on. Yeah. So that's the question. But it's definitely capturing non-Gaussian information, some of it at least.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot.
The next question is Dheeraj. Is Dheeraj around?
Yeah, it's still closer. Yeah.
I don't have an extended microphone. It's just embedded in the.
And this is better.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, for example, if you talk about the H0 tension and the omega k that has recently been pointed out by some people, that if you try to fit Planck with curvature, then your H naught tension gets worse. So similarly, there is this sigma 8 tension, and also there is this H naught tension. If you have this DES observation, and if you have compared the models with different models, of course, these tensions depend on the model and also the direction in which the observations constrain them. But I would like to ask, is there any model that can solve H naught and sigma 8? I mean, not solve completely, but can reduce the H naught and S8 tension, for example, together?
So that's a very good question. I don't know the answers. I mean, there's a lot of models that tries to do this. I know this, for example, attempts with varying massive neutrinos, which I think quite promising. So I think I will turn to the theorist in the audience for that. The only thing I would say is that, and it's related to another question maybe you ask or someone else on the chat, is that personally I think it's very important to focus on all the tensions at the same time rather than one by one, because in cosmology, fortunately or unfortunately, most of the measurements we're making are model dependent. We're fitting a big model to the data. Now, there's a few areas where it's more model independent, but really when we look at all of this, it's mostly model dependent. And I think we should embrace that, and that's okay. And as a result, one should be a little bit careful about just looking at, in a 6-parameter space, looking at one of the 2D plot that has a tension without looking at the rest. Because in fact, we did a lot of studies with a quantification of tensions using entropy, information entropy approach. And we find that sometimes it's very misleading. Sometimes it looks like there's a tension, but actually there isn't. And sometimes when you project in these 2-dimensional planes, you think you don't think there's a tension, and actually there is, or vice versa. So I think it's more interesting to look at the global and look at all these data sets together, and then try to see if a model can solve everything at once. That being said, it is true that if you project in 1D, the H naught tension is more severe now than the sigma 8 tension.
Thanks. You also talked about the systematics, right? You got to take care of the system, you vary the systematics along with the model parameters. Now, sigma 8 or S8 is degenerate. I don't know S8 but sigma 8 is definitely degenerate with the H naught in CMB studies. Now, if you take care of the systematics, your S8 moves towards a particular direction. When you add Planck, does it help solving the H naught, or does it make it worse? I mean, does it increase the H naught if you include the systematics? The degeneracy increases, so the S8 goes to a particular direction. So, is it the direction that favors the H naught tension or not?
So it depends. So there are lots of different systematics. I mean, for the weak lensing one, the blue contours I show you here, for example, the main system, the two main systematics, which are the calibration of the shear of the distortion measurements, the image which is done from the image analysis, and the calibration of the photometric redshifts. So these are the main sort of measurement systematic. These will not depend on H naught. They just move the blue up and down, basically. So that's the one that needs to be taken care of carefully. The other systematics, which are more subtle for the weak lensing measurement, which is intrinsic alignments, which is a sort of intrinsic shape correlations coming from the physics of galaxies and the galaxy formation and so on. That is taken care of by looking at the redshift dependence of the signal, which is different for the lensing and for this intrinsic alignment. Again, this is not an H naught correlated thing. It's different.
No, I was asking.
So it's different. It's different in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was actually asking that H naught doesn't come into the picture here in particular in the systematics. I was saying that H naught and sigma 8 are correlated in the Planck. For example, if you just do a baseline analysis, you will see that this sigma 8 and H naught are correlated. Now, if you just use your, here, does it?
I think we see it here.
Okay. Now, I was asking that when you allow the systematics to vary, the intrinsic alignment and the other things, the calibration parameters, the degeneracy in the sigma 8 increases, right? So it goes to a particular direction, or it increases to a particular direction. So does that direction helps you to resolve the H naught thing in Planck? So it increases the H naught value when you add the days y1 and Planck, or does it make it lower? For example, omega k, for example, if you take into account omega k, it brings down the H naught, so it makes the tension more severe. So
that's a good question. I don't know. That if for that you have to do the joint analysis simultaneously and have the system. You need to marginalize the systematic simultaneously in the Planck and the weak lensing. I don't know what happens if you do this. Yeah,
okay,
that's a good question. Yeah.
Thanks. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Raja Gopalan Nair, are you around?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, please ask your question.
Professor Refrigier, actually, I have a doubt. I don't know whether it is out of the way. See, I came to know from your lecture that you are interested in testing general relativity theory, its correctness and all that to a higher range. What struck me was all about the type 1 supernova. It is a standard candle, and besides that, its mass can be accurately known because it is created by a white dwarf exploding exactly at the Chandrasekhar limit. So using this type 1 supernovae, will you be able to check the correctness of general relativity theory? Say it can do the weak lensing effect with CMBR or anything around. Are there any such? Sir.
Yeah, so yeah, that's good. I mean, the type 1 supernovae play an important role. I didn't talk too much about it because I focused mostly on the early universe, but nevertheless, I mean, supernovae have many important roles. I mean, the first one is, as you know, the standard candle application to measure dark energy at low redshift, which is what you're mentioning. It gives an anchor to the H0 measurements, so it's very important in order to be able maybe to resolve this H0 tension with supernovae and the whole distance ladder. There's also a very interesting application, maybe that's what you're also alluding to, which is the supernovae get lensed also. So you can do, it's called supernova lensing. So if you have enough supernovae, you can also measure the lensing of supernovae that gives you a measurement of the sort of the projected density field in a very small pencil beam in the direction of the supernova. For the moment, there's not enough supernovae, but with something like LSST, for example, we might get there, thanks to the time, the temporal information, the time domain information that LSST can. So Vera, the Vera Observatory, Rubin, sorry, the Rubin Observatory, as it's called now. So that's also a very interesting measurement. It can give you also very, so using that, all of this information can be used to constrain an extension of the model, which is in the gravity sector, which is where you modified general relativity. So you can consider the lambda CDM model and modify it in different sectors. One sector is you can modify in the gravity sector by adding more degrees of freedom, characterizing deviation from GR, for example. So they can play a role here. But them acting as a lens, which is maybe also part of your question, because we know that that's very hard because first of all, the mass is still quite small on cosmological scales, and since they are you have to catch them at the right time. I think that's pretty difficult, as far as I know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Next question is by Sharbari. Sharbari, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Alexander. Nice. I think you've answered my question. I was just confused about the terminology. By non-Gaussian information, you just mean higher order statistics, right? Beyond power spectrum. Okay.
Hi, Shara. It's very nice to hear from you.
But since I have this opportunity, I wanted to ask you, what are the constraints you expect in the future on modified gravity models because of from the particularly the lensing data?
Yeah. So first, back to your question. Indeed, as I said, it's very nice to hear from you. We haven't talked in a while. I mean, I was mentioning the non-Gaussianity for this machine learning application. I was talking about the non-Gaussianity coming from nonlinear structure formation, but that can also be extended to primordial non-Gaussianity. I mean, there's no reason not to. You just have to generate more simulations with modified initial conditions. But in principle, there's no problem. It could be used there too. So that's one answer to your first question. The second question was, what was it again about?
Yeah, I was just wondering for the modified gravity models.
Modified gravity, yeah. So modified gravity, yeah. So you can do quite strong tests. So for example, if you look at, so we looked at in this kind of analysis here, the simple modified gravity, phenomenological model where you modify the growth, you keep the background unchanged, then you modify the growth of structure, for example, and then you have this gamma parameter, and you can get pretty high precision on it with only weak lensing, for example. If you add the other probes, you also do really well. You can also look at, this was the study before not using all the cross correlation I'm talking about. This is just combining the probes, independently at the end, assuming they're independent. So I suspect that one can do very well with the future surveys and all these cross correlations. I think that would be very powerful. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next question, Laura Laconi.
Hi, thanks for your talk. I think that's actually, you already answered my question from one of the previous one.
Right.
Okay.
So we move on to.
Thanks for the question.
Okay, I think the next question we take is Amo Ghavarsha. I think this is for Tarun. He has probably answered, but Tarun, are you around?
Sorry, I'm around.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the status of CMB Bharat is that we made this proposal in mid 2018. We have gone through the rounds of presentation and shortlisted by the selection committee. But beyond that, there is in this year not much has happened. Unfortunately, largely because this year has been pretty bad for everyone. And I think even ISRO has not made as many moves. I mean, they were setting up cells for ISRO kind of research at different MHRT institutes like IITs and IISers, but I don't see any remarkable progress on that. Regarding the proposal, I mean, as I am constantly told that it is still one of the live proposals under consideration.
Okay, so I think it is time to wind up for the day. We thank both the speakers for giving wonderful talks.